Hello, it is me. A Dram A Day is back after a brief hiatus, for which I apologise greatly. I've had a hell of a lot on and everything's gotten in the way, but the intention is to come back strong with a few videos because I've got quite a few exciting things to be going through and trying and tasting and talking about over the next couple of months. So what better way to kick off with what has been categorically named by the press, the official press, mainstream press, as the world's best whiskey. This has been reported. Now, if you're into whiskey and you're on social media and Facebook groups, you probably would have seen this news. It was announced on 27th of February. I'm filming this on the 8th of March, so it was a couple of weeks ago, and this made the headlines across a number of newspapers and was reported on in social media circles. If you're not into whiskey in a big way, but you've seen this title and you're wondering what it's all about, essentially there was a recent whiskey competition, the World Whiskies Awards, and this particular whiskey, I have it here, I have a bottle here, Queen Margot 8-year-old, was named the world's best Scotch whiskey. So this was reported in the Evening Standard, which is a very highly regarded newspaper, mainly down in London in the UK. A £13 Lidl whiskey wins top prize at the World Whiskies Awards, and with money to spare. The brand's Queen Margot whiskey has taken home the top prize for Best Scotch Whisky at the World Whiskies Awards, chosen by a panel of 40 international industry experts. Impressive. And yes, this is a £13 bottle of whiskey from Lidl, the discount department store. This bottle I picked up yesterday. It's not actually £13, bit of fake news for you. It's actually £13.49p. Massive. I mean, that's a right rip-off, £13.49. So, Evening Standard picked up on it. We also had, there's a newspaper called The Eye. It's kind of like an independent newspaper. It's not quite tabloid, it's not quite broadsheet. They have put down Lidl whiskey, named the best Scotch in the world, and it's only £13.49 a bottle. There you go. They've at least given the right price for it. A bottle of whiskey sold in Lidl stores has been named as one of the best in the world. The Queen Margot whiskey triumphed at this year's World Whiskies Awards, and customers can, at the budget supermarket, can enjoy the award-winning tipple for the bargain price of £13.49 per bottle. And you'll see on the website in big bold letters, Best Scotch Whisky. The 8-year blended Scotch whisky scooped the coveted title of Best Scotch Whisky at the awards, beating the likes of Johnnie Walker Black Label, which retails for more than double price. Wow, eh? Mighty impressive. One more, joe.co.uk, which is a pretty highly regarded kind of newsy. I always thought it was like a kind of lad bible, like blokey type thing, but it seems to be more kind of like news, media, sport, that sort of thing. And on their website, they have also declared this as the best in the world. £13.49 Lidl Scotch whisky named world's best Scotch whisky. Lidl's own brand of whisky has won big at this year's World Whiskies Awards, where it was named best Scotch whisky. So this is the best Scotch whisky in the world, or actually is it? Because here's the thing, the World Whiskies Awards is quite a coveted, quite highly regarded whiskey awards, and there is a good reason for that, because they do everything blind and there is quite a complicated process to actually naming the best whiskey in the world. Now, I'm going to go through the process of how they choose the world's best whiskey and why this isn't necessarily the best Scotch whisky in the world, but I need to give you some kind of context as to why what the newspapers are reporting isn't necessarily the case and isn't actually true. So, I've been speaking to two people who have been involved in the judging of the World Whiskies Awards. One of them is this gentleman, who is Billy Abbott, who works as a trainer, kind of online content creator for the Whisky Exchange. Easily one of, if not the biggest online and bricks and mortar whiskey selling stores in the UK, if not the world. So Billy knows his stuff. I spoke to him and also this gentleman, Jason B. Standing, who is best known for being Jason B. Standing, about the whole process of because they're on the judging panels for the World Whiskies Awards, and I wanted to get the in-depth details of exactly how it works. Jason and Billy were absolutely fantastic, gave me the time of day through Messenger. It was as simple as that. I asked the question and I got reams and reams of information from them, and it was absolutely brilliant. And I want to give you that information so that you can put into context exactly what award this has won and where it stands in Scotch whiskies and world whiskies. So, if you are a judge on the World Whiskies Awards panel, It's done by invite, they can be recommended, and it is mainly trade, but there are also people from outside of directly the industry. What they're trying to do is get a spread of people to be able to give us as broad a broader range of views and opinions on whiskey as they can possibly get, but still have people interested in whiskey. Because if you did an awards, even if it was blind, and you did an awards of people that were, say, they were just master distillers, they would be looking at it more technically than somebody that would be looking at it as a retailer, or somebody that was literally just a blogger, a whiskey lover, kind of somebody like me. Now, I work in the industry, I work for Gordon MacPhail, and I'm incredibly lucky to do so. But before that, obviously, I did a Dram A day when I wasn't working in the whiskey industry. I was just a whiskey lover. So I have a different opinion and a different taste and a different way of tasting to somebody who works directly in the industry, who works directly in the production, and they're looking at different things. So you need to get a spread of people that will be able to give you as fair a fairer reading of each whiskey as you possibly can do. So I am a judge for the World Whiskey Awards. And about a month ago, I think it's the timescale is about that, a month ago, I would get a box that would turn up in the mail with my name on, which would have between 30 to 70 5cl samples of whiskey. Sounds ideal, doesn't it? It's not quite as easy as that, and it's actually quite a lot of hard work. So you get this box of samples and you get a spreadsheet, and the samples that you're given are grouped into categories. Now, they won't be just all Scotch, all Australian whiskies. They will be broken down into categories, which are then a bit like a kind of like a cup final, where you have rounds where it's kind of like picking categories. Not cup final, crufts is probably the best way of doing it. Everybody probably would have heard of crufts. And you have your kind of types of dog, your dog genres. Not the species. There's a word for the types of dogs. So you get Dalmatians, you get Labradors, you get proper dogs, and then you get those shitty yappy dogs that really shouldn't exist. That are the ones that normally win crufts. So you pick the best out of those bits, and then you face them off against each other. But you kind of go a bit more in depth than that. So it's like you get gun dogs, which have got Labradors and I think Dalmatians and Rottweilers and other things. What you're doing with the World Whiskey Awards and the equivalent is you're picking the best Labrador, the best Doberman, the best Dalmatian, to then go into the gun dog category to go, what's the best gun dog out of those ones? The winners of that, what's the winners of the best of the winners of each individual category? And then you pick your best in show. And this is what you do with the World Whiskies Awards. So as a judge, I have this package of, say, 50 samples, and they would be split into, and it depends on how many there are in each subcategory, but there would be, say for example, 10 of each, but it might be 10 will be blended Scotch whisky 12 years and under. There will be another category that will be blended Scotch whisky, say 13 to 18. Now I might not have that, somebody else might have that. I might have Australian single malt 12 years and under, or Australian single malt 21 and over, or Taiwan single malt, no age statement, that sort of thing. So I will get a random selection of these subcategories. I then try them blind, so all that's on the sample is the category that it's in, the ABV of the whiskey, the alcohol content, and then a unique ID. And that's basically set by the company that's doing the World Whiskies Awards, so that you've got a unique identifier, so you have no idea what whiskey that is. You might be able to guess, and if you work in the industry, you might actually try it and go, oh, that's one of ours. But that's why other people are doing it from outside of the industry as well, or retailers, or experts, or writers, or bloggers, or whatever. You're trying to make this as neutral as you possibly can do, and make each tasting as objective as you possibly can do, by not knowing what it is, just that it's in this category, and it's this ABV, and that's it. That's all you do. So you try it, and you score out of 10. You can go to one decimal place, so you could score it 9.7, 8.4, however you want to do. And you have to write a tasting note of 50 to 100 words, which is essentially kind of to evidence you have actually tried it, and you're not just slacking it off and going like, yeah, 6, I can't be bothered, I'm too tired. It's a lot of work. Now, speaking to Billy and Jason, they do this properly. It would be very easy for you to go, I've got a box full of 70 whiskies, brilliant, try that. Oh yeah, that's about a 6, we'll call it a 6.3. Jason told me he was trying in some cases 3-4 times of a 5cl to really give it as much chance as possible. Go back to it. If he's tired, maybe look at the notes that he's written for it. Before he's even written his tasting notes, he's writing notes for each individual one. I don't even think they get paid for this, to be honest, as well. So, this is all kind of out of the goodness of their own heart, but to try and give you the best possible and fairest rewards for the work that's been put in to make these whiskies as they possibly can. What then happens is a little time later, they are down in London, I believe, and you get your second round. And round 2 is the winners of each subcategory. So the winner of the Blended Scotch Whisky, 12 years and under, will go against the Blended Scotch Whisky of 13 to 18, and then 19 to 25, and however it goes, over 35, whatever it is. The winners will then get faced off against each other. So you will have a flight of these winners of the subcategories, and there are tables of about 8 to 10 judges who are all given these flights. They will go through the flights, they'll nose them, they'll try them, they will discuss them with the people around the table, they will then score them individually, but they won't score them in terms of a pointage, it's more in terms of favourites. So it's that's first, that's second, that's third, that's fourth. And this can be anything from like 12, 13, 14 subcategories that you've got to pick to literally 2. Some of the very small countries, Taiwan isn't going to have a massive range, so there's not going to be a large amount of whiskies that you can put into a particular group. I should point out at this point that the whiskies that are involved in the awards are submitted to by the brands, and the brands will pay a fee. Now, you could say, oh, well, if they pay more money, do they win? Having spoken to Billy and Jason and having read about the World Whiskey Awards in particular, I would be pretty confident that there is no money changing hands here to win awards. Now, with the likes of Jim Murray, he does get a lot of stick, and a lot of people do say, oh, well, you've paid for it to be the Canadian club, not the Canadian club, the Crown Royal that won. How much did they pay you for that? And the problem I have with Jim Murray doing his Whiskey of the Year is he's one man with his own tastes that don't necessarily match everybody else. So for one person to turn around and say, this is the best whiskey in the world, that's his best whiskey in the world. That's not yours or mine in the world. I would have more faith in a large group of people, and I think we're looking at about, well, it says 40, but I think it might even be slightly more than that. So call it 45 people who work in the industry, but work in various parts of the industry with various companies, or not even companies, but are writers and whiskey lovers and bloggers and retailers, people that are selling it. So everybody has a vested interest as a fan of whiskey, but it's not necessarily in terms of vested interest of they have paid us lots of money, so this is why we're going to pick it. I would have more faith in those people being able to pick the best whiskey in the world, even though it's still subjective. But the process that they're going through, this is blind, this is done carefully, this is done as fairly as they possibly can do it. It's still not ideal, it still doesn't include every whiskey in the world currently available at this point in time. It depends on what brands want to send in and actually pay the fee for to go into the awards. Now, they're very, very highly regarded, but not every brand is involved. There are some distilleries that just don't bother with it. So you can't say that this is absolutely categorically, whoever wins this is categorically the best whiskey in the world, because not all of the whiskies in the world are actually in this. But it's as good as you can possibly get. So round 2, you sat around this table and you pick the winner of what would be blended Scotch whisky. So under 12 goes against 13 to 18, 19 to 25, however it is. And then they rank that, it goes away, they look at the numbers, and then they can go, right, these 10 people have decided that the best blended whisky is that one. And then later on that day, round 2 and round 3 are done on the same day. Later on that day, you go to round 3, where that is literally Scotch malt whisky. So all the winners of Speyside, Highland, Islay, Lowland, they all go together. You do another flight. You do it with blended whiskies. I think it's blended whiskies where you do like world blended whiskies all together. All the winners of Australian blended whisky, Scotch blended whisky, Irish blended whisky, all of those go together. You do another face-off essentially, and that's how you get your best single malt Scotch, best Scotch blended whisky, and then from there they will even pick the best. I don't think they do the best whisky, I think it's the best Scotch single malt, the best Scotch blended. It doesn't go to one single best whisky in the world ever. From recollection, I could be wrong. I'm trying to be as detailed as I can, because to me it's very important that this is explained and put into context, for then Lidl to send a press release and for newspapers to pick up, because Lidl have been pretty canny here, and they've not done anything technically wrong, but I think they've been very clever in how they've sent a press release out. So here is a picture of the list of winners of the subcategories, and these are released on the day or shortly after round 2 and round 3 happen. We won't know the winners, the overall winners of each category in terms of best Scotch single malt, until the end of March. So it's in a few weeks away. It's normally like an awards event, a gala dinner just before Whisky Live. So at the end of this month, we will find out what the best blended Scotch whisky is and the best single malt Scotch whisky. We won't know what the best Scotch whisky is because it's not been announced yet. What has been announced is what's on this list, which is the best blended Scotch whisky aged 12 years and under. Queen Margot won best blended Scotch whisky 12 years and under. That's it. The big news story of this is in the blended Scotch whisky 12 years and under is Chivas Regal 12-year-old and Johnnie Walker Black Label. Now, Johnnie Walker Black Label is a massive brand, and yes, it's twice the price of the £13.49 Queen Margot. That's the news story, but that's the only news story there is. This was voted in a blind, objective, as fair as it can possibly be, whiskey awards, blind whiskey awards, that this was voted by people within the industry, experts who know what they're talking about, who love whiskey, who have done this blind with no subjective precursors or anything. They thought that Queen Margot was better than Johnnie Walker Black Label. That's it. Now, what Lidl have done is sent a press release out to say, hey, look, we won this award. I've not seen the press release, so I've not seen exactly how it's worded. And apparently Lidl have gone back to some of these news outlets to say it's not the best Scotch whisky in the world. It wasn't awarded that. It was just awarded the best blended Scotch whisky under 12 years and under. That's all we've won. Now, this is 8th of March, so is it 8th or, it's 8th or 9th of March? I don't know what day it is. It's a Friday. And The Independent also had initially a news report to say it was the best Scotch whisky in the world. They have amended theirs, but the Evening Standard haven't changed it. Joe.co.uk have not changed it. The inews.co.uk, they haven't changed it. So you can put Queen Margot into Google and you can look at Evening Standard website, and maybe it was in the paper as well. I've not seen a hard copy of it, but you can look at it now, 2 weeks after it's happened, and it still says that Queen Margot is the best Scotch whisky in the world. It's not. Yet. It would be a massive news story if it does win Best Blended Scotch Whisky, because it's up against Johnnie Walker Gold Label and Royal Salute 21-year-old, which are pretty damn impressive whiskies. And for a £13.49 bottle to beat those guys, then you've got a news story in your hand. Then you can really shout from the rafters. But right now, it's not so much of a big deal. It's impressive, don't get me wrong. They've done very well, and I'm opening it now to try it because I want to see what it's like, but it is not the best Scotch whisky in the world. So, let's give this a go. Now, what Jason said, and Jason actually tried this, he had the category of blended Scotch whisky 12 years and under. So this was one of his that he tried. Now, what was interesting is in the Independent article, it does actually say it contains dried apricot and plum, which the supermarket says imbue it with a rich sweetness and depth of flavour and is mellowed for 8 years in oak casks. Now, that line, it contains dried apricot and plum, kind of implies that it's actually a flavoured whisky. This article, particularly by The Independent, really wound me up, because it's this type of article that makes it difficult for me, as somebody that works for a whisky company, that does whisky tastings, that deals with consumers of whisky, to accurately explain how whisky is made, what it tastes like, the processes involved, because there are articles like this that are giving essentially misinformation, and it just makes our job within the whisky industry really difficult. Now, Jason did pick up in our discussions that he had tried the Queen Margot, was impressed with the amount of apricot particularly, and it's interesting that they are going on about that. He also said if you tried it on its own, it would probably just taste like whiskey. But if you put it in the context of another blend, then this is where it stands out, and this is where it has something to it, which is why it scored well. Now, unfortunately, the ideal one to have tried would have been to put it against Johnnie Walker Black Label, but I don't have any Johnnie Walker Black Label. However, I do have a miniature of the Antiquary. I always keep calling it the Antiquary, but the Antiquary is looks a bit like Johnnie Walker Black Label in the bottling, and I can't actually open this one, so I'm going to have to use my teeth. I apologise. And is a 12-year-old blended whiskey from the owners are it's the owner company of Tomaten, Takara Shuzo. So it's not quite as smoky as the Johnnie Walker Black is, but it is at least a blended whiskey that will give me something to pair off against. So colour wise, where's my bit of paper on? I do have a colour. I've just realised this glass is absolutely filthy, but I'll swill it around and we'll see. Maybe it'll help the flavour. So it's not particularly dark. And I'll put the Antiquary up. Not too dissimilar, but it's not the darkest. I mean, it does look, but it doesn't look too deep where I'd be worried that there would be caramel colouring added to it. So, 40%, £13.49 a bottle. The world's best whiskey. Not really. The world's best blended Scotch whiskey, 12 years and under. Yes. So on the nose, not a great deal. There is quite a nice fruitiness to it though. What's there, it's not massive, it's not deep, but there is a light kind of peach. I can get the apricot, but that might be because I'm being influenced by what I've heard previously. But there is a soft pink fruit, peach, nectarine, apricot, that type of fruitiness to it. It's very soft. There's no burn at the back of the nose. It doesn't smell harsh. There's not much graininess coming through. It's still a little bit flat, but what is there is actually quite pleasant. And that soft fruit element is there on the palate. There's a slight edge, which is probably the grain. Quite a nice mouthfeel though. It's quite rich. It dies off quite quickly. But what is there is actually quite pleasant. There is this apricotiness. It's not dancing around my palate. And it's not particularly full in terms of, it's not chewy, and it does die off a little bit, and it feels a little bit watery, and it almost to me feels like if they bottled this at 43%, it would be even better. But you know what? It's decent. It's very, very pleasant to drink. It's not outstanding, but there is this sweet, and for me it's more peach than apricot, but it's that type of fruit, peach, nectarine, apricot, those type of soft fruits, little bit of biscuitiness in there. The bite of the grain is enough that it just lifts everything and makes everything interesting. Now I'm going to try the Antiquary, or Antiquary, or however you want to pronounce it. Now this is a bit more earthy on the nose, but not in a smoky, peaty way. It's more of a, I don't know, it's a little bit rougher. More of a bite at the back of the throat. And the grain is kicking through more. It's slightly more metallic. It's that kind of young, youthful grain element that, and it very much is if you're holding two peas in your hands and you lick your fingers, and it's that kind of slightly metallic, coppery, not unpleasant, but not pleasant either. It's a little bit kind of like, there's more to this, but the Queen Margot arguably is more enjoyable to drink because it's a little bit more well-rounded. I can absolutely see why it would be up there as a category, if not winner. There is a very, very nice, soft fruit character to it. It's peaches, it's nectarines. There's almost a bit of pear there as well. I'm really impressed with it. And to be honest, for £13.49, it's an absolute bloody bargain. It really is. You cannot go wrong with this. You absolutely can't go wrong with it. There is nothing offensive to it, which you could say is a fault. The fact that there is nothing offensive to it because there's not much of a character to it. But what there is actually, it's well balanced, very, very easy to drink. Like almost too easy to drink. I'd love to see this at 43, 46, maybe pushing it, but with a slightly higher alcohol content, just to lift the flavours a little bit more. I think 40, diluting it down to 40, has flattened it a little bit more than it needed to be. So the proof of the pudding, a kind of peachy apricotty pudding, will be, and they've done it, when it comes to round 2, when they have it on the flight with the category winners. They have already done this. We know they've done this because they've announced the winners of round 1. That's how we know that this was the best blended Scotch whisky 12 years and under. Last week was sitting around a table with some judges, and they would have had this against Johnnie Walker Gold Label and Royal Salute 21 and some of the other category winners. I can't remember what they are. If it beat them, I mean, it would have to go some to beat them, because I've had Royal Salute 21 and I've had Johnnie Walker Gold Label. I would be amazed if this beats it. But if it does, then you have a new story. If this is the best blended Scotch whisky, then hands up, no arguments with that. It's a very, very good whisky. It's an absolute bargain for £13.49, and I do recommend you go and pick it up, because for that amount of money, there is not much better. I don't think there is anything better, to be honest, at that price. It's very, very pleasant. I could give that to anybody that drinks any whiskey and they would be absolutely fine with it. They wouldn't think it's amazing. It is not an amazing whiskey. But in the context of the price and the fact it's a Lidl blended whiskey, you have a preconception of what it's going to taste like. And it is not rough as fuck, which is what most people would assume it's going to be. It's very smooth. It's very easy to drink to a fault. But I'm going to give it the positive side of the fact that it's that easy to drink. So that is not the best Scotch whisky in the world, but it is certainly a very, very good one. And I don't think Lidl can argue with that. Right, that's me done. Next video is going to be kind of the other end of what I've just encountered, but will be a bit quicker. Thank you for your time. I hope you appreciate why I've had to go through the process of the World Whiskies Awards and why it was important that there is some representation out there. There is some, and I hate to use the term fake news, but this is kind of equivalent of why some journalism is lazy, because they are taking a press release and altering it so it sounds even more impressive than it is. Because I don't think Lidl have sent a press release out saying this was the best whiskey in the world. They are now going back to those outlets and saying not actually true, as evidenced by the Independent. But it's a prime example of why you can't believe everything you read in the papers, and also why working in the whiskey industry is really difficult, dealing with the mainstream who have assumptions because of what's being written by mainstream press, who don't really know what they're writing about, but are just looking at a headline. So yes, £13.49, Lidl, get yourself a bottle. You honestly can't go wrong. Right, I shall see you at the next one. Cheers.